Back of the auditorium, can you hear me? Well, my story begins when I was about 12 years old.
Oh my God, a long story.
A long time ago. Yeah. I happened to be at a different place. Probably none of you have ever been there. But a best friend of mine in grade school, a boy by the name of Bernie, he and I palled around quite a bit. His dad was the head electrician at the Dixon Theater in downtown Pittsburgh. Some of you remember the old Dixon Theater. And every Saturday, he would take us down there, his son and myself, and we were allowed to roam around backstage and help. You know, we'd have to lug some wire for him or sweep up or something. He'd give us little chores to do in the backstage area or down below the stage. And then we were allowed to hang out while the show went on, Saturday afternoon matinee, and watch the show, as long as it wasn't one of those real risque, Folies Bergère or something like that. We were allowed to watch some shows. Well, we were in the property room, and there were a couple of gentlemen in there, and there was a man. He was about 57 years of age, as I recall. He was sitting at the desk, and he had one of these Viewmasters. And you'd have to put 2 slides in this thing, and you could hold it up and look at it. And he was showing pictures of his home in Hollywood. The swimming pool, the back of the building, some of the interior shots. And they were passing this thing around. Came my turn, I was having a difficult time trying to see this clearly. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But anyway, I had to take the Viewmaster and go over to the desk where there's a little lamp and lean over that lamp with this thing to have the light shine in there so I could see better than just looking at it the way I normally would. And the reason for that was I was born with cataracts on both eyes, congenital cataract. And they were growing, as you know, when you get cataracts, they start to go dimmer, grayer, get darker, and if not removed, you eventually would go blind. Well, these cataracts were starting to get kind of a light gray effect, and that was causing me this straining to try to see clearly. Well, this gentleman that was passing this thing around, he and I never really spoke, but he took his Viewmaster back, and Barney and I left, and he went on about his business, and so did we. So a little bit later, he was in the show that was playing there. The name of the show was Harvey. And the name of the man that was sitting at the desk that showed me the Viewmaster, his name was Frank Fay, F-A-Y. He's pretty well known back in the day. He started off as a stand-up comedian. In fact, he was given a lot of credit for being one of the first good stand-up comedians in the business. He eventually being maybe a month later, 3 weeks, got in touch with my parents. He wrote them a letter, and he asked if he could, they would give their approval, so to speak. He would like to do something to try to assist me in finding the doctor to try to clear up my vision problem. Well, my parents wrote back, yeah, if you want to do that, we feel great. Come on, let's meet. We'll get started. Well, he didn't want to meet. He was on the road traveling with his play. He left Pittsburgh, and I think he went to Ohio to put it on again, and to Chicago, and he was going out back to his home. He was kind of going back across the country, back to Hollywood. So my parents never met him. And my meeting with him was, I just saw him on the other side of a desk. never really spoke to him, and that was it. So he writes this letter. My parents write back, giving their approval. Yeah, what can you do? And he suggested. He said he had spoken to people that he knew in his realm that suggested to him that maybe we should get out of Pittsburgh as far as trying to find somebody that could do this, remove these cataracts. And they thought the best place to go would be to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. So my parents got a hold of the hospital in Maryland. They found out that there was a doctor there that specialized in removing cataracts. And they got a hold of his office, and he said he would like to examine me. So we made a trip to Baltimore. And Dr. Angus McLean was his name. He was the top eye specialist in Johns Hopkins at the moment, or at the time. And he examined me thoroughly and said, I can correct that. I can remove those cataracts. Remember, I'm 12 years of age now. And this is back, what, 1947 or so. So we had to make plans to set up the initial time to get to the hospital, arrange to have the operation scheduled, do all those preliminary things. And we started, my parents started communicating more with Frank Fay. They would have to do it all by letters. They could never talk to him on the phone. So my mother would write a letter to him saying, we talked with Dr. Angus McLean, he's the best in the business, we're going to Johns Hopkins. He scheduled us for this specific date sometime in the middle of June to be there. Well, Mr. Fay then comes back to my parents and says, I'm sending money to you to cover your travel expenses, to cover the doctor's expense, to cover the hospital initial cost of getting him into the hospital. And I want you to rent an apartment if you're going to be there for longer than a couple of weeks. And you send me the bill. You have the rental agent send me the bill. Okay, we get things started. We get down there, I get logged into the room. I go into a 6-bed ward. No air conditioning. It's the middle of June in Baltimore, Maryland. They have the windows open. They have a breeze going through. And in the 6-bed ward, I'm the oldest kid there. The other ones are a bunch of young babies that have crossed eyes. And the doctors were fixing these crossed eyes. And these young child would get their eyes corrected, and they'd be out of there in 3 or 4 days. It wasn't my lot to be there in 3 or 4 days, or be released in 3 or 4 days. We started, well, let me backtrack a minute. 2 days before we went down, I'm out running around in the neighborhood, fell and broke my right wrist. I had to go down to the Southside Hospital. They said it wrong. I'm in a lot of pain. We had to go. All this other information, or all this other things were set up for us already. So we had to go. We couldn't cancel anything. So there I am in this cast with my wrist all turned cockeyed in a lot of pain. We get down to the hospital. I'm in traction. I got my hand out, hanging up here. I'm moaning and groaning. You know, I didn't know what to do. My brother was saying, try to do something to make it easier for him. So they got an orthopedic surgeon to come in, and he took me to his building. I don't know if you're familiar with Johns Hopkins. It's like a big, big block long hospital. The eye, ear, nose, and throat building is on one end, and the orthopedic building is on a far other end. So 10 or 15 minute gurney ride over to the orthopedic side. They x-rayed it, and they said, oh, we're probably going to have to take that cast off and kind of re-break it and set it right. And my mother says, what do you mean you're gonna have to re-break it? He said, well, we'll just kind of like put it on a cup and hit it with a little hammer. And she said, is that the best you can do? He said, I know how I'm doing, don't worry about it. So he and Dr. McLean got together and said, we'll break the right wrist again and you do the left eye. We'll do it at the same time. They did not have pentothal and that kind of stuff. It was all the ether masks. They dropped the ether on the mask and count backwards from 100. Well, that's what we started. So I go into the first one. One fella's over here, this other guy's over here. I can't hear a darn thing. I passed out. I don't think I got down to 91, counting backwards from 100. But anyway, they did the first operation on the left eye. Get back to the room, new cast on this, still in traction, but no pain. It was wonderful. He set it right. So we accomplished something right off the bat. The eye surgeon, of course I had to have a cover over the left eye. He came in and next day, checked it out, looked good. He said, we'll just go in there and clean up any little particles that might have been left in there by trying to break that cataract up when he pulled it off. So that meant another operation getting back in there. That happened about a week later, 5 days or so. So back into the operating room again, knocked out. He does his thing on the left eye, patch on there, and we're back in the bed. Now we got a little bit of a chin strap over the back of the bed with a sandbag hanging on the back of it. No pillow, rubber sheets, June, Baltimore, 119, 25, I don't know how many degrees it was, but it was terrible. Sweating like crazy. My mother began to read to me the entire history of the Revolutionary War. Honest to goodness, this book was about this thing. She started like the first day when she came over from her apartment. Fortunately, she got an apartment right across the street from the hospital. So she would come over and after breakfast, and we'd chit-chat with the doctors and find out the latest news about what the eye was doing, etc. And how many shots of penicillin I had in my left hip or right hip. They kept alternating. Penicillin was the thing of the day back then. And they didn't do it in your arm. You kind of rolled over halfway, give you a shot on this one, and 2 hours later it come in and pull on that one. And I just don't know how many of these things, but I probably could have strained spaghetti or something if I didn't. That kept going on. So now it comes time, the cast is fine, right eye has to be operated on, back up to the operating room a week or so later, does his thing with getting the cataract removed. A few days later, go back in, make sure the floaters, they call them, make sure they can get everything out of there that they can, and patch that one. Well, now I got patches on both. I'm blindfolded. I can't see anything. Still got the chin strap with the sandbags, but I could tell by the voices when the shift changed, who the nurses were coming in, who the orderlies were that come in, would take me and give me a sponge bath or whatever. I could tell all these people by their voices. My mother kept feeding me when I was all blindfolded, and she tricked me. I hated green beans. And she said, these are wax beans. I like wax beans. So I had more wax beans while I was laying there. And then she finally did when I got home. You like green beans too. So, you were getting green beans all the time. But anyway, Dr. McLean gave me a release. It was about 6 weeks later. He checked everything once again, said glasses will be available, not right away. They're going to be awfully thick. They did not have lens implants at that time. They didn't have lasers. And as I said, there was penicillin, there wasn't anything else. So he said, you're going to have pretty thick glasses to start off with, and as you progress, and the things heal up good in there, your glasses will begin to be cut down, but that's going to take a year or two. You get a new pair of glasses every 8 to 10 months, new pair of glasses. And in the meantime, though, the landlord was sending the rent bill to Hollywood. My mother was receiving, I'll say, maintenance checks from Mr. Fay directly. He'd send her $100 every week or so for her upkeep, as far as she had to have laundry done or whatever, or for her food if she had some food in the apartment. So he took care of all of that. The doctor bill, that was paid by him directly with the doctor. The hospital bill was paid by Mr. Fay directly to the hospital. We had no expenses whatsoever. We came home. He paid to have the trip home. Paid for the first pair of glasses, I believe. And we wrote him a letter that I should have, when we didn't have a copy machine. We wrote him a letter thanking him profusely for all that he had done. The one thing that he did ask is that as long as he was alive, he didn't want anybody to know that he had done this. So we had to swear, we're not going to tell anybody, and if you pass away, we'll divulge it if need be. So we never really told anybody. To give you a little background on Frank Fay, he was married about, I think, 3 times. He was married to Swanson, Gloria Swanson, I think, for a period of like 5, 6, 7 years maybe. But he had about 3 wives. He played in that Harvey play on Broadway. I know it was one of the longest running plays at the time. I think it ran for close to 5 years on Broadway. He played in other plays too. They weren't so successful. He played in a couple movies. If you Google Frank Fay on your computer, you're probably going to find out a lot of information about him. He wasn't really well liked by everybody. He was rather arrogant. But with us, it seemed like he was so down to earth, a man of God. I mean, he was always God blessing us and, hoping that God would take care of us, et cetera, et cetera. And God and Frank Fay sure did. So that's how I wound up getting my eyes fixed. Now, I couldn't get implants right away. And well, when did they get invented, so to speak? In the 50s or 60s somewhere, maybe. But anyway, 6 or 8 years ago, I got lens implants finally. Like people that go to get their cataracts removed nowadays, they can get lens implants right away. Back then, they didn't have them. So I just wore thick glasses most of my life. I saw everything I wanted to see. And was able to read pretty good. I do not like bifocals, but yeah, we made it through life. We got married and had 3 kids and come along happily ever after. We sure owed a big debt of gratitude to Mr. Fay for what he did for me, unbeknownst to anybody else. The man just, and like I said, I never spoke to him. He was in that room, he showed me those pictures, I handed it back to him, we left, he left. To give you a little quickie about the theater, what Bernie and I did when we would loaf around down there. We would go downstairs underneath the stage, and one play was South Pacific, and the guys that played the crew on the ship, the sailors, they walked around with no shirts on and shorts and that. Well, they had a blue, what do they call, ultraviolet light tube, I guess it was. they would keep their tans during the winter time, because it was winter time when we were in there. They would keep their tan by going down there and just loafing in that room with this light that would give them, I guess they have these tanning booths nowadays, but these guys would just loaf in this room with this special light, and that's how they kept their tans. I saw the Oklahoma, I saw Blackstone the Magician, I saw him setting up some of his tricks, I saw some of the basic tricks worked. I could never do them, but I saw how he was putting special things in special places. That was interesting. The trap doors that he used in the stage, where they could fall through and go right into the room underneath. It was a fun time in my life for those trips down to the Nixon Theater with my friend Bernie and his dad, and gave my parents' name and address to Mr. Fay, and things went on from there. So that's my story. Hope you were interested. I hope I did good. Very good. Thank you.
Just keep sitting there.
Were you able to hear really good?
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Are you open for questions?